Ayubowan, Namaskaram. Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Wool and Forest podcast. Now, as we always begin in this way, let's take a little moment for silence. I'd like you to sit in whatever way is most comfortable for you, whether it's with your feet firmly on the floor or up in a cross-legged position on the chair as I am sitting right now. I'd like you to sit upright but relaxed and allow your eyelids to very gently close. Now take a deep cleansing breath in through your nose and out through your nose. Let your breath settle down and just bring your awareness to the tips of your nostrils. Become aware of air coming in through your nostrils and coming out through your nostrils. Just bring your awareness to that sensation. There's no need to breathe in any special way. Just watch as your body does something that it does every moment of your life. Now quietly sit with your breath for a few more moments. And when you feel all the energies in your body, all the sensations have settled right down, like sand floating down to the ocean bed. When you feel that stillness sitting within you, gently, very slowly, open your eyes. Hello, welcome to episode 5 of the podcast. we are going to try something a little bit different today, and I will be moving along with the podcast a little bit more swiftly. I am attempting to keep these podcast episodes shorter than I have managed so far. So my aim is to record podcast episodes that don't last more than 30 to maximum 35 minutes. But that means that in order to do so, this is the first day that I'm trying that. But in order to do so, I will not be able to share absolutely everything that I have done, that I will do, that I have in my hands, out of my hands, all of that. So I will be picking and choosing so that I can hold back some more things to show you in the following week. So because I will be moving a little bit more quickly through the podcast and also sharing a little less, however, that does mean that I will be able to bring out podcast episodes more frequently than I have so far. So that is the plan. That is the new plan, and we will see how it goes. And of course, with any of these changes, I would love for you to please leave me your comments and feedback down in the comment field below. It is so valuable to hear what you think of each of the episodes that I do, because I'm sort of trying to find this balance at the moment. I know time is a precious resource for everyone. For me, as a mother of 3 little children, one of them who is only a year and a month old, and my other 2 little darlings are both under 7 and under, and they're all unschooled, homeschooled at home. And so they're with me all the time, all day and all night. And because of that, the amount of time that I have to dedicate to things like podcasting and work and everyday life, it has to be very consciously carved out. And not only am I conscious about that side of it, but also on your side. I know it takes an awful amount of commitment and setting aside of precious time to be able to sit down with a podcast and be with somebody like this for a full hour. It's a lot of time out of the day. So to those of you who have done that so far, I am so grateful, because I know how much effort you have to do and what a precious gift you are giving us in terms of your time and your energy to watch this and be with us. But because of that, because I also want to respect that, I think coming to a more efficient flow of work, of having a few constraints and restraints around how I do this podcast and how I structure it, I think it will be for the benefit of everyone, me, myself, and all of you included. And this is something I will speak about going forwards, and I have spoken about in my old audio podcast as well, that constraints and restraints and putting certain restrictions, conscious restrictions, it can be such a liberating way of working. And it's certainly something that I use as a tool very much in my own creative process, and as somebody who doesn't separate things like creativity and life. Really, it's a part of living life, bringing a little bit of discipline and a little bit of a framework. So let me know how this podcast sounds, because I will be taking a little less time to do things, as I have done in the previous episodes. So your comments and your valuable feedback will help me to find that perfect little middle ground. Thank you. I hope also that you enjoyed that little moment for silence and a little moment for light and stillness. I appreciate the fact that this is probably something you're not used to in either the YouTube environment or other fiber or textile podcasts that you watch. I understand very much that what I'm doing here is something very much against the grain of what is popular, what is encouraged, what is normalized and glorified. In fact, to start with silence, to start in stillness, goes completely against the status quo, the accepted and received wisdom of how to become successful on YouTube, how to gather audience and viewers and subscribers and all of that. It is completely against the current climate of social media, which prefers, speaking at 100 miles an hour, speaking without stopping, no gaps, gesticulating wildly, and what I often see erroneously described as intensity. I always see this word, be intense, or he or she was so intense, but really, it's not intensity. Intensity is something that always, without exception, comes from a place of fundamental stillness. Intensity that doesn't come from stillness is actually not intensity at all. I think it's sort of almost like a manic hyperactivity and hyper-energeticness that is quite compulsive, actually, not very conscious at all. That's just accepted as what it means to be intense, but I disagree. And so what I'm doing here is very much stepping away from that mold, stepping away from that model, and saying that what we're doing here at Wool in the Forest is not just another fiber podcast. It's not just another textile podcast or textile story or fiber offering. It's tapping into an entirely different way of living and of consciously making your life, of rerouting ourselves into a foundation of stillness and encouraging and celebrating, bringing in moments of silence and stillness into our life. In fact, I hope that through the work I do, that it encourages you yourself to pepper your days with these little moments of silence, which I hope then will grow, that those moments will grow and grow to such an extent that it encapsulates and embraces your entire day. And so that stillness and silence becomes the basis from which you live and engage and act in the world. So that is why the first part, and I believe the most important part of this offering through the podcast, begins in silence. So having given silence its rightful place, let's move on to the second segment of the podcast, In My Hands. So in my hands, as I said before at the beginning of the podcast, I will not be able to share with you everything that is in my hands. But there's a couple of things that I did want to share today. And the first project that I have ongoing in my hands is this beautiful crocheted mandala pattern, which is going to become a crocheted pillow. Now, this design is by a wonderful, wonderful crochet designer whose name is Yssabett Bueno, and her Instagram handle will magically appear before you right about now. And Yssabett is somebody whose work I found because I went on a bit of a hunt a while back looking for crochet designers who use overlay crochet in their work. Overlay crochet as a technique has interested me for a long while because I want to actually use it in my own design work in the months to come. And usually many of you who follow me on Instagram and have followed my work for a while will know that I almost never work from other people's patterns or designs. I'm always using my own. I'm always designing on the fly, designing on the needles or the hooks. that's just the way I work with all my creative expression. However, with this particular technique, I wanted to go and really learn it properly from somebody who does it well. And I settled on Yssabett because her work is absolutely beautiful. It really is stunning. And I decided that she would be the one to teach me about this fascinating technique called overlay crochet. And I believe also that she is a viewer of this podcast. So hi Yssabett, it's your beautiful work that we're speaking about today. However, this particular pattern and this technique is very involved. It requires you to focus. It's not something you can, set down mid-row and walk away from. There's color changes happening on every round, and you have to make sure that your stitch count on each round is correct and exactly as it's written out in the pattern, or else the overlay pattern will not evolve and stack one on top of each other the way it's meant to. So because of that, it is growing very slowly because just with the way my life is right now, I just do not have the time to sit and give to a craft for half an hour, 1 hour at a time. I just don't have the time. So I'm using dedicated moments in my day or in my week to work on this. And I'm very excited to share with you as it grows and turns into what I hope will be a beautiful pillow that will become a permanent part of the studio setup here. So you will see more of that. So that is in my hands. The second thing that I have in my hands is something very special. So here I have something very special and important to me that I have in my hands. So this skirt came about as a result of experiments I did a couple of years ago when I made this. It's an entirely hand-stitched skirt. It came about as part of an experiment in no to little waist garment designing or flat pattern designing or pattern designing. Now, before I came to both any other fiber work, whether it's knitting or crochet or any of that stuff, or yarn work or wool work, my background is actually from woven garment making. So old world tailoring techniques, hand stitching, flat pattern drafting, draping, things like that. So I've always been very much interested to know how to create garments with as little waste as possible, because that is something that's very important to me personally and very important in terms of what we're bringing to you through Wool and the Forest. And so this came about as a result of some play. I wanted to see how I could use bits of fabric to create a garment, to create a skirt, designing directly on the dress form, without being dictated to by a flat pattern. Flat pattern cutting, to those of you who are familiar with it as a design tool, can be a very wasteful way of creating garments, woven garments. And I wanted to allow the fabric that I had and the shapes and the sizes and the amounts, the quantities that I had to dictate what the design and the shape of the final garment would be like. And I had an incredibly beautiful time doing this. It was so instinctive. It was so organic, the way the skirt just sort of made itself in front of me, draped itself onto the form. So this, the shell fabric is a cotton, sort of a gauzy cotton fabric, and the inner layer, the base fabric, is a cotton knit, an organic cotton knit that I hand dyed a while back. And on it, now what's on it is what is so special. So on it are some designs that I have drawn out, because on this skirt I will do some indigo based batik dyeing, batik technique. Now, batik is a very, very important textile technique to me personally, but also to the textile heritage that I come from. Sri Lankan batik, South Asian batik batik has a very important place in South Asian textiles, but Sri Lankan batik itself has a very special place in the world. It's well known around the world, and really the batik artisans in Sri Lanka are so talented, and the techniques they use are so innovative and so unique to that island that it verges, the work they produce verges on fine art, really. It's almost not textile art. It's in that area of painting and fine art expression. It is so beautiful. There's some incredible work, batik work, coming out of Sri Lanka, and has done so for a long time. And to me personally, it is a very important technique because it was one of the main, not the main, but the secondary offering through which my mother offered her creative expression, and was a pretty large part of the products and textile products that came out of her boutique. My mother, I have spoken about before, is a bit of a textile innovator of her time in Sri Lanka. She was responsible for bringing a whole language of motifs, traditional Sri Lankan motifs and designs and images that had never been used before in woven design from archaeological sources, from historical sources, and bringing them into the textile language of the country. And there's a lot of that she also expressed and experimented with in the batik work. So I think you will be seeing a lot of that being fed through me, and batik is going to become a very important part of what we will be offering through Wool in the Forest. So again, this is just a beginning. It is a sign, a teaser, a tester, a wonderful sign of more things to come from us at Wool in the Forest and from me. So very excited to share with you how this comes along and how this evolves. So that is all I will be able to share with you about what's in my hands. And next week, I can share a little more, I think. Yeah. So moving on as swiftly as we can, but without feeling rushed. I hope I am managing to walk that fine balance of being efficient, but not being rushed. Please let me know if I am. So here we are in the third part of the podcast, Changes in the Verge. Now, today for Changes in the Verge, I have something very special planned. However, before we jump into that, I wanted to say a little bit of how beautiful this month has been. May has been unusually sunny, unusually warm. It's just been a glorious extended spring, I feel, but in around the middle of May, we definitely fell swiftly back into what is a very normal May for this part of the world, for the Olympic Peninsula, which is very dark, very cloudy, cool, lots of mist on the bay, lots of mist rolling down the mountains, and just a lot of wetness. But it's been lovely to have both, to be perfectly honest. And this month being my birth month, I was able to enjoy all the flowers. There's still wildflowers and cliff flowers exploding every time we go to the beach, which we have done quite a few times. We've made it to the beach quite a few times in the last couple of weeks. And a lot of berries are flowering. The huckleberries are flowering, and some of them are even going to fruit, like waves and waves of salmon berries that sort of take over these lands. They are already fruiting. So a lot of beautiful things changing in the verge and growing everywhere we see. But today I want to dedicate Changes in the Verge to a very special being that is a very special and important part of the landscape here on the Olympic Peninsula. And that is the mighty madrone. This week on Changes in the Verge, we're talking about the madrone tree, the Pacific madrone, which at this time of year is at its most beautiful. Our little cottage in the forest is right on the borders of the Olympic National Park. When we are out exploring, there is so much to find and see and adventure in the national park that we hardly ever have to foray away from it. Right on the coast, overlooking the bay, this particular park has some of the largest madrone trees that I have ever seen and produces these incredibly sweet-smelling flowers, which attracts a lot of honeybees and hummingbirds. May, for me, is defined by the arrival of two things: dear little blue forget-me-nots that cover and carpet the land around our cottage, and the sight of madrone trees bursting in white blossoms whenever me and my girls head down to the beach. It's like lines and lines of these peeling red bark trees with their jewel green leaves bursting into these clumps of white blossoms. The Pacific madrone is also a very important tree for the indigenous communities. This tree grows all the way up into Vancouver and British Columbia and all the way south into places in Northern California, actually. The indigenous people, they dried, they soaked and prepared the berries that come later in the summer from the madrone trees. The bark was used in all kinds of wonderful ways to make tinctures, boiled, to make teas. And to me personally, it's a very important tree because it has a lot to do with my connection to this peninsula, to these lands that I live on. So while there is so much I could be sharing with you about changes in the Verge, this is really what I want to leave you with today, this image of beautiful big madrone trees with their clouds of white blossoms. And whenever we have not been falling in love with the madrone trees and drinking in its scent, we've been at home, spending so much time on the deck, around the deck, in the garden, just outdoors, just busy with our garden, trying to spend as much time in this incredible sunshine that we've had. So we have spent a lot of time outdoors, eating outdoors, picking flowers, making beauty, trying very much to get some kind of handwork done while being outside and watching my babies, but you know how that goes with busy toddlers. It's just been such joy, even though I feel like I have made nothing, knitted nothing, spun nothing. But life, incredible, overwhelming, joyous, whole and perfect life has been lived so fully that I feel like it doesn't matter at all that I sat on the deck for 10 full minutes and maybe spun 12 full inches of fiber. It's been one of those Mays. So I hope you all really enjoyed that little foray into the Verge, into the Pacific Northwest, into the Olympic Peninsula, this sacred, beautiful place, and that you got to meet one of the important, like I said, great beings of this land, the madrone tree. So let's carry on. Let's move on to Out of My Hands. What are the works out of my hands? Oh my goodness, I will be here for much too long if I show you everything that's out of my hands. So I've decided that I'm only going to show you some of the things, not all, some of the things that have come out of my Indigo vat this week. I think that's all I have time for to share. But next week, I promise you, there's lots of goodies coming next week. So here are some delights that have been swimming in my Indigo vat and that I would like to share with you now. So out of my hands are 3 beautiful hanks of yarn that I want to share with you today. This yarn here is, I believe it's called Peace Fleece. I'm not entirely sure, but with the magic of post-production, the name of this yarn will magically appear on your screens right about now. So this is this beautiful hank of wool that was gifted to me by a dear friend, and the base yarn was a sort of a peachy pink, sort of quite a vibrant peachy pink, and it had neps in it all the way throughout. There are these neps of darker pink and also a little bit of golden yellow. So as I'm doing with many things around the house today, I thought, ooh, what would happen to this if I dipped it in indigo? Everything in the house is going for a swim in the indigo vat. And so I put it in the indigo vat, and this most beautiful thing happened. In fact, I'm probably going to have to do a little bit of a cutaway and do a bit of special video of this yarn, because I don't think you'll be able to see it from here. The incredible tonality of the yarn now that it has been dyed with indigo. So this beautiful purple was obviously a result of the pink meeting the gorgeous blue, but something totally unexpected happened, and this is really one of the reasons why I love over dyeing so much, are these beautiful little surprises, because the little neps, the little darker spots of darker sort of a fuchsia pink and the golden yellows that are all over the yarn, they didn't take the indigo as well as the rest of them did. So wherever the indigo wasn't taken, there are these little bursts of color, and that has just brought this yarn alive in a way that it simply was not before it was dyed in indigo. So lovely, lovely, lovely. It's about, I would call it about a heavyweight worsted, a heavy worsted. And I'm not sure what it will become yet, of course, but whatever it does become, it's going to be beautiful. So there's that one, beauty. And the second yarn I want to show you is this gorgeous thing. Now this this yarn is made by a Dutch company based out of Amsterdam, I believe. They're called West Wool. And this was again a gift that was bought for me by my husband, by Arik. The last time he came back from the Netherlands, I told him, bring me some Dutch yarn. I have never knitted with either, a Dutch breed sheep's wool or any companies, yarn companies based out of the Netherlands. So he found this and he bought this for me and bought me a few other skeins. And this particular color was this sort of odd gray. It was a little too light for my liking, and it was not quite gray, not quite white, not quite silver, and for my taste, it had a little bit too much luminosity, a little bit too much shine. I like almost all of my yarns. I like some luminescence, but not too much. Not too much shine on my yarns. I like most of it to look quite muted. So I wasn't very happy with it. I didn't know if I was ever going to use it really in its original color. So Indigo to the rescue. And what happened with this yarn is actually, again, another little piece of magic. The blue that has arisen as a result of the gray jumping into indigo is exactly the kind of gray blue or blue gray. It's difficult to actually come up with a way to describe this yarn. It is the perfect gray, in my opinion. This is exactly the kind of gray I like and love, really. And I realized the other day why I love this gray so much, because there's blue in it. And this is exactly the kind of gray that I associate very strongly with where we live, with here in on the Olympic Peninsula. Now, because of the kind of weather, the kind of climate that is created here due to, very tall mountains rising straight out of the Pacific Ocean, it is very unpredictable weather. So on any given day, the bay, when we look out over the bay from the cottage, it will be, the skies will be brooding and dark and cloudy and gunmetal gray, all the shades of gray that you can imagine. And then suddenly the sun will burst through for a little while through this, hole in the clouds, and it would be burning up the ocean for a little bit. And wherever the sun is, the ocean goes this sort of dark grayish blue, and then the sky starts to reflect that, and then the ocean reflects the sky, and you get this incredible bluish gray, which is a very comforting color for me because of my love for this place, but also personally I'm very drawn to it. And so to have achieved that in this yarn quite by accident has been it's been quite a pleasure. So it's to me, it's again another wonderful example of the magic that is indigo. For most people, when you say indigo, you think blues, right? That it gives us a variety of amazing blues. But indigo is not just blue. Indigo has a capacity to give an incredible variety of colors. And I believe with the experiments that I have been doing with the dye vat, I believe that I don't ever need to use any other natural botanical or anything to get my kind of grays, because indigo gives it to me. You have to tweak the vat a little bit. You have to treat it a little differently. You can't treat the vat or the fibers in the same ways that you would when you're trying to get vibrant blues out of an indigo vat. But if you treat her properly, she will give you the most beautiful, beautiful grays. So lots more of this kind of work to come from me. And I hope you're looking forward to that, those of you who love grays as much as I do. Now, the last skein of yarn. Oh, my hands. Brown hands are blue. Very much blue. There's a lot of indigo still left over in those hanks. The last hank I want to show you is this wonderful fluff ball. This is a Highland Cascade Eco Wool. It is a chunky weight yarn, undyed, unprocessed. It is unbleached. It's the base color was a sort of a very natural variation of white, I would call it. It was not perfect white. It was a variation of white, a natural sheep's color. And it took the indigo very, very beautifully, but it's more of a sort of a bouncy, happy, early morning, springtime sky blue. It's not the deep, mystical, mysterious, brooding blues of the other two yarn. It's a very happy yarn. It's a bouncy yarn. And whatever it becomes, I think it will be a very happy garment. So I'm not sure what it will be, but oof, I can't wait to wear it. I think it will be for me because it's everything about this yarn says happy. So very, very happy with that. Far too many happies in those sentences. And yes, those are the 3 hanks that I would like to show you. And I am itching to show you other things because they're all lying here around me in the studio, but I will exercise that stillness and restraint that I keep going on about and hold on to these things for the next episode. So carrying on with as much grace and stillness as we can muster. We are now at segment 5 of the podcast, A Moment for Magpies. Now, today I have, again, a little treat for you for the magpie moment. I want to take you for a little swim in an underwater magpie bottle, I would call it, not a basket, but a lot of my magpie tendencies are on full flow and unrestrained when I'm at the beach, and beach life here and going down to the ocean is a very big part of our life here at the cottage and on the peninsula. So, who arriveth up the cottage steps, up the studio steps?
IRS.
So my little one has come into the studio to have a little nurse and spend a little bit of time with Mama. This little munchkin is very attached to me still because she is still a nursling. She has started having some solids, but she is still very much attached to her mama. So you will see her coming in and out of frame often during these podcasts, I believe. So here we are back again. My little baby Usha has had her nurse and her time with Mama and has stepped outside to be back in the fray with her papa and her two sisters. So let's carry on. Where were we? I feel a little bit lost. A moment for magpies. We were talking about a little treat. Underwater magpies, or underwater magpie is what I have for you today. Let's quietly have a little dip into my underwater magpie bottle right now. So I do hope you enjoy my little forays into magpie baskets and magpie bottles and all that. Because, again, this is all a part of this is how we live. This is how we experience this life here. And this is what we want to bring for you in the middle of the podcast, to actually take a little moment, few moments for silence, to dedicate actual minutes that someone else would want to try to fill with content, fill with noise, fill with distraction. I want to do the opposite. I want to create moments in my sitting here with you to actually fill with silence, to allow silence to come in and out and to be the background and the ambience in which we meet like this. So I hope you appreciate it. I hope you enjoy it. And I hope it is of some value to you in your busy, busy day. So let's move on. The rustling that you can hear there are my podcast notes. Yes, I have learned the importance and the incredible value of having notes. I used to work so off the cuff, very disorganized basically. And my wonderful husband, Eric, has been a very good, positive influence in that direction. In teaching me a few much needed organizational skills. So I have notes and I'm using them. So what's down the forest path? Oh, that's right. I am working on a small video offering, which I hope I can release in the next few days here on the YouTube channel, on the Wool and the Forest YouTube channel. So if you are intrigued by it, if you want to know more, best way to keep in touch, to keep abreast of everything that's being offered by Wool and the Forest is to subscribe to this channel. So if you like what you're seeing, give us a like and subscribe, because that way, when I next upload something on YouTube, YouTube will let you know. That's how it works, right? So subscribe so you can know when this next offering comes out. And of course, I always drop a line and give a shout out to let you guys know on my Instagram as well, which is another good place to find me, to connect with me, to message me, and to see what we're doing with Wool and the Forest. That's Wool and the Forest on Instagram. So this little video offering that's coming is a part of brownhandsblue, part of the brownhandsblue project that I have started, and which will form a very big part of what comes out of Wool and the Forest. So keep an eye out for that. It's being worked on right now, and we can release it in a few days. And what is more? What else is down the forest path? Soothcast. Intrigued. What is Soothcast? Soothcast is something that's coming, and I know I'm being a terrible, horrible tease here, stringing you along with the promise of all these mysterious things and not revealing much at all, but I promise you I will reveal more in the next few episodes of the podcast, because Soothcast is something that Arik and I will be offering to you. However, we haven't yet formed an idea, a concrete plan of how we will bring it to you, whether through the podcast or whether through a separate offering on the YouTube channel. We haven't formulated that yet. Soothcast, while I have figured out the name for it, the naming and titling for it, it's still quite nebulous. It's still sort of metamorphosizing into place. So more to come about Soothcast, but that is definitely a very interesting little shadow that's flitting around the forest bend. But what I can say about Soothcast is that it has a lot to do with a very significant part of how I operate here on this peninsula, on a land that I wasn't born on a land that I am not native to, that doesn't contain my ancestry. But it is a way, part of Soothcast will be a way to honor the incredible, potent, ancestry of these lands, of the indigenous people who were an inextricable part of this landscape, of this very soil, of the earth, of everything that grows and lives here. It is not something you can create in 100, 200 years or in 2 or 3 generations. These incredible people and their cultures have coexisted with nature in the most profound manner for tens of thousands of years, and no amount of the barbarity and the trauma and the pain and the losses, the thievery, the genocide really that they've suffered, which is what this country is built on. No amount of that can erase the very real existential potency of what happened here between these people and this land. And I experience it all the time. And the more I sink into it, the more I honor it, the more I explore it and investigate it, the more profound my experience of the place I live in, it actually expands. It becomes more beautiful. And my heart is actually beating right now, thinking about how that continues to happen. And I want to honor that. I consider it a great privilege to be allowed to be a custodian of this place for a short time. Because, of course, no other place in the world calls to me like the land of my birth. And I know I will always end up back there. But for as long as I'm here, this place is so special. I often tell people, why? What is it that is so sacred about the Olympic Peninsula? And I often say, the air is thin here. The air is very, very thin here. So access to these dimensions, these other dimensions of the material world, are very easy. You can slip into them quite easily on the Olympic Peninsula. So more to come. More to come.